thank you all for your sensitivity and for being open to what I have to communicate to you regarding Amanaska Yoga in 3 parts or 3 classes. We don't have too much time, so we have to cover reasonably vast ground and at the same time communicate the essence of what the spiritual life is all about. So I just want to begin with the recognition that there's an outstanding problem for all of us as human beings to solve, and that is the unsolved problem of inner suffering and outer suffering. It's there in our consciousness, it's there in our families and society, and even at the level of the nations. And the spiritual life really ought to direct its attention towards this one and only problem, because all other problems emerge from this one root problem. Now, it's better for us to, at this stage, right in the very beginning, to move away from the customary ground of belief and faith, which is the ground on which the religions and many spiritual teachings stand. Now, this might appear rather strange, but actually it is not. Because if you look at every field of human endeavor, whether it is in the sciences, in the humanities, and in engineering and in medicine, in every field of research in geology, in the study of flora and fauna, you will find that people are understanding, and a great deal of emphasis is placed on fundamentals, understanding everything through fundamentals. And that is the way any problem in any one of these realms is really solved, by the humanists or by scientists or by philosophers. And therefore it's appropriate for us not to retain our anchorage to any ancestral belief or ancestral faith, but rather to bring in the understanding as a fundamental approach, and so that we may gain a very clear understanding. And once we gain that clear understanding, we are going to secure an intellectual conviction. And with that intellectual conviction, naturally, our understanding is going to spill into the arena of action. We are probably going to undertake some serious sadhana or serious practice, and thereby our understanding is deepened and our inner and outer well-being goes forward. So from a fundamental perspective, because we are talking about man's inner suffering, let's begin with a broad understanding of man. And we see that he has got a body which is undeniable. And then he has got a consciousness which really cannot be separated from his body. And then he has got a spirit whose existence is not straightaway evident. Some people accept that the spirit exists beyond the body and beyond consciousness, and they probably accept it through an article of belief or an article of faith, because it is laid down in the religions, it is laid down in the scriptures. But we are going to see that the body, the consciousness, and the spirit are realities, human realities, especially the third, the spiritual essence of man, can all be discovered if only we devote our attention and begin to understand what's going on in our consciousness and at the rock bottom of our consciousness. Now, in the literature, people don't always use the word spirit, because that word comes to us from the religions and from spiritual sources. there are alternative expressions which serve us equally well. Awareness is the essence of what we call as a spirit, and Atma is another alternative synonym, and in the Yoga Sutras the word Purusha is used. So whichever way you want to address that spiritual essence of man, it is there, and we have got to understand this triune unity of body and consciousness and awareness, all tied together and holding together. Now, to get a nicer feeling about this triune unity, let us think of an analogy. The triune unity we see in the triad, earth, moon and the sun. Now, we have never seen the triad, earth, moon and the sun breaking up. They always exist as an integral whole. And earth here stands for our body, which is the most palpable to the senses. And then the moon, which is waxing and waning, represents our fickle and fluctuating and frivolous mind or consciousness. It's never the same. It's all the time in movement. And then beyond the earth and the moon, there is the reality of the sun, which is the source of life. And in our analogical understanding, the sun stands for the spirit or awareness or Atma. So our triune identity of body, of consciousness and spirit or Atma or awareness should be understood in the same way in which we understand the triad, the earth, moon and the sun. Now, when each of these in its life and wholeness, the wholeness is body, consciousness and awareness, is very well integrated or in harmony with the other two members, then there's a great sense of well-being and great gushing love and streaming intelligence is pouring out of our consciousness, and we become creative and very intense people in the act of living. But when the body, the consciousness and awareness are not in harmony one with the other, then the body may become sickly or deranged, and the consciousness can also become deranged and dysfunctional. And therefore the problem arises because in the act of our daily living, we may abuse the body through overindulgence, and we may not know how to give a proper place for the mind of the consciousness so that it will become operational only when there is a problem to be solved, and restful and silent at other moments. We may not have learned the whole art of that, and therefore the consciousness is in a flurry. It's got huge amount of anxiety and fear driving it, and therefore it's in disarray. And because all of you are very serious people, and most of you have probably come to Hatha Yoga through asana and pranayama, regulated breathing and body postures, you have brought a great deal of discipline to the body, and you have made the body supple and the body more sensitive and more healthy naturally, and more intelligent too. So you have probably achieved all of that. And then there is also the larger challenge of bringing order in consciousness, where now chaos or disorder prevails. And the chaos or disorder is in the form of conflict, it's in the form of frustration, disappointment, a sense of lack of fulfillment, and craving which is not assuaged, and whole host of things. And ultimately, when there is no fulfillment, and when there is no sense of peace, then the consciousness is ruffled and it's in a flurry. The traditional name for this is dukkha, or suffering. And most of us probably agree that there is the suffering in us, and there is also suffering out there in the world. And the question is, can this suffering be ended completely through a new approach? Whether the suffering can be observed, whether it can be understood, and whether the whole momentum of that suffering can come to an end. If that can happen, then I believe that the triad of the body and the mind and the spirit, or the body and consciousness and awareness, they will exist in great wholeness and wellness, so that the human being is functioning at his peak performance, not just as a body, but also as a highly intelligent consciousness, and also as a spiritual being, because now the consciousness is in great harmony with the bedrock awareness, which is the source of all life. We will continue further along these lines. Namaste, and thank you again for your interest and keen listening.